Are comic shops against crowdfunding? Do comic shops pick and choose what comics they sell based on ideology and have it out for conservatives? There's a lot of people online who think so. So, what's the truth? Hey there, this is Perch. This is kind of a tough topic for me in the sense that, obviously it's one that personally affects me. And it's also one where kind of some rumors get started or some misunderstandings get started. And it's really kind of snowballed into a bigger issue than maybe it is. So let me get to the basics of what's going on. Do comic shops hate crowdfunding? Well, the answer generally is no. Yes, there are some comic shops, in particular some comic shop owners, who are against anything that takes consumers out of their shops. The comic store owners who are against crowdfunding are the same ones who hated DC doing the deal with Walmart. They're the ones who were fearful that Marvel and DC's digital efforts would spell their demise. There's always going to be comic store owners who will complain about things or try and rage against inevitability. From where I sit and from my standpoint, things like getting increased distribution at Walmart equals more marketing for comics. More eyeballs on comics means more likelihood that people will come into a store later on in life. And in terms of digital distribution, you can't rage against the future. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of when and how. So I can sit here and I can be angry about it and I can complain at retailer summits to Marvel and DC about doing it, but it's really kind of pointless. It's going to happen. The best thing I can do is prepare myself for it. But the second part of the question is a little bit tougher. Do comic shop owners and shops pick comics based on ideology? Well, the broad answer is no. They pick comics based on what they can sell. And if they think they can sell it, they will. And if they don't think they can sell it, they won't. There are a handful of stores, but when I say handful, I really mean handful. I don't mean like 20%. I mean like 1%. There's 1% of stores which I would call activist stores. These are shops that complain about everything. And if they smell that a particular creator or somebody on the title voted for Trump, they will make their feelings known. These are the same kind of individuals who, in the store, when you're browsing the stands, will say, "Hey, you won't like that. That comic's crap. You should buy this instead." Have you ever had that experience in a comic shop? Probably less and less. When the direct market first opened and it was in competition with the newsstand, you would get more comic shop owners who would kind of inflict their opinions on you. That's been parodied in The Simpsons and in other places of the comic shop owner who told people how it was and would take a bad comic out of the hands of a buyer and say, "I won't sell you this. It's so bad." But times have changed, and frankly, they changed a long time ago. The market having a huge mess in the 90s pretty much fixed that. No comic shop owner is going to take a comic out of the hands of a buyer, unless, of course, this comic shop is one of those 1% that's doing well or is what's called a boutique business. A boutique business is a comic shop that really doesn't need to make money. Maybe the owner is independently wealthy. Maybe it's the spouse of a rich person. I mean, those things exist. And when the comic shop doesn't need to make money, then the store owner and the people can kind of behave however they want. That's not the case anymore. And there's just very few of them. My personal advice to anyone buying comics is have a good relationship with your LCS. And if you don't, stop buying there. There are mail order systems, there are places to go. Don't give your money to a store where you feel really frustrated about it. If you dread going into the shop because you hate the people who work there, don't go into that shop. It's that simple. Make your life easier. It's your money. Empower yourself. But these shops exist, and typically they exist in a region where there's a lot of like minded people there. I mean, laying cards on the table. If you have a comic shop in Seattle, downtown, your clientele is going to be liberal. They're going to most likely dislike Trump by about, let's say, 90%. So, as a store owner, you'd be crazy if you sell pro Trump material in your shop. People will stop shopping there. Now, if you live outside of Seattle, and when I say outside of it, I mean 10 miles outside. For those of you who don't know the community, there's a really large city across the water called Bellevue, less than 10 miles away, rich, affluent, perfectly willing to buy Trump material. Seattle and the Pacific Northwest in general leans liberal. And so you'll see shops cater to that demographic to some extent. But when I say cater to that demographic, I mean things like selling saga or books that may have a harder time being sold in places like Dallas. The region is going to impact what's sold in the shop. And if you're in a heavily left leaning place, you're going to sell primarily comics that are left leaning. But any comic shop owner, again, taking out that 1% of extremists or ideologues, any comic shop owner will happily stock whatever they think they can sell. And they're not going to get in the way of the customer. So where some of this came to a head is about a year ago, Richard Meyer, who runs the Diversity in Comics YouTube channel, I think it's called something different now, he had a comic called Jawbreakers. And initially, he had formed a deal with Antarctic Press to basically get that book published and into the shops. Now, what happened next is in court, and it's all going to be sorted out between Mark Wade and what calls are made and what happened there. I'm not going to go into that topic, but I want to keep on with the shops. So a couple shops, and literally less than 10 shops, objected to the comic, meaning they posted either on Twitter publicly or on Facebook, "We won't carry this alt-right hate-mongering comic Jawbreakers. We're not going to carry Comicsgate-affiliated product." Now, they didn't post that because they were just trying to make people mad. They posted that because the clientele of their shop would respond favorably to that message. Again, these are more activist shops. And if you just take some time to look further back in their feed, you will discover that they've made similar statements about a number of different people. These are shops that live in a call out, cancel kind of culture. And again, not wading into the politics, they're doing what they think is right for their clientele, or in a couple cases, they're well funded and they frankly don't need the money. So they're going to run the business the way they see fit. That's their right. At the same time, keep in mind that a lot of local comic shops, particularly smaller ones, they don't carry Antarctic Press at all. In fact, for a lot of the smaller shops, they'll carry Marvel, DC, and Image, and not all of Image. And that's about it. They'll occasionally sprinkle in other titles that they know have good marketing. Now, why do they do that? Is it because of ideology? No, it's because they don't have the customers to support it. If you're in a fairly big city and you've got 8 shops, let's say, within a 30 to 45 mile radius, chances are one of those is bigger. In Seattle, there's Golden Age Collectibles and Pike Place Market. That's the big guy. For a long time, they competed with Xanadu, but Xanadu went out of business. So really, the only big guy in the area is Golden Age Collectibles. And then there's a lot of smaller shops around the area. Golden Age Collectibles carries just about everything, but still not everything. If you're a Pullbox customer and you want an Antarctic Press book, they'll order it for you, happily, no complaints, but they don't stock many for the shelf. If the big guy isn't stocking it, the little guys aren't going to stock it at all. Again, this is just business. So there were some comic shops that had no intention of ever ordering Jawbreakers as published by Antarctic Press because they don't order anything from Antarctic Press. It had nothing to do with the individual, and in fact, 9 times out of 10, they've never heard of it. You'd be surprised how many local comic shops aren't online, don't have a social media account, and kind of ignore the whole thing. That's their right too. But most of those shops would happily carry the comic if somebody asked for it. And they do that today. There's many shops in the area that got on board with the crowdfunding effort for Cyberfrog because they had some customers that wanted it. For whatever reason, they didn't want to buy it direct. They wanted to buy it through their comic shop. The comic shop placed the order, and they sold it. This is not uncommon. But based on the Jawbreaker situation, a number of people came up with the belief of quote unquote, screw the local comic shop. There are enemies, they're in bed with the big publishers, all they care about is Marvel and DC, they're sycophants, they deserve to die. And they got this based off of that situation. Now, that's a little bit unfair. Well, it's actually a lot unfair. The local comic shop didn't get involved in that situation. The local comic shop was just doing what it could to make money. Now, for what it's worth, of the less than 10 comic shops that objected to Jawbreakers and posted so publicly on their Twitter account, 2 of them are out of business now. I don't think they're out of business because of Jawbreakers or any of that. They're out of business because they ran their business poorly. And that is related to the decision of why you would go on Twitter and mouth off about a particular comic. That's just a bad business decision no matter what you're doing. Negativity tends not to sell, at least not in a shop. It does great for YouTube videos, but it doesn't do well in the shop. One of those shops is close to me. It's up in Mill Creek, Washington. It was incorrectly identified as being in Bothell, Washington, which is a next door town. That one hurt me quite a bit, just being blunt. But the shop up in Mill Creek made a stink about how they weren't carrying Jawbreakers. And a lot of irate fans went onto their Yelp and bombed them, as well as that neighboring shop in Bothell, as it was originally reported incorrectly, I might add. Anyway, it's a shame that a comic shop is going out of business, but it's also not really a surprise. By the time that comic shop got around to making its statement about Jawbreakers, they had already isolated many people in the community. Other shops, because they didn't play nice with other retailers, and they were making frequent statements about support for different causes. I think it's well and good to talk about things you like. If you want to support the LGBTQ community, that's fine, but you shouldn't do that at the expense of other customers. And this shop would do that. They would post up things like, straight people not allowed today. That's just a dumb business decision. But again, all of this came long before Jawbreakers, and that store is out of business, and that store is representative of pretty much nobody. Most comic shops are just trying to stay in business. They're not trying to wade into a political debate. They don't have the time, the energy, or frankly, even the information to do it. So please, if you don't like going to your local comic shop, don't go. If they treat you badly and are rude to you, don't shop there. But please, don't stop supporting your local comic shop because you believe they were unfair to a guy you respect on YouTube. Unless you know that comic shop was somebody who objected. Big Bang Comics is another one who makes a lot of public statements at various times. And they were one of the shops that objected to Jawbreakers. If you're a fan of Richard Meyer and Jawbreakers, don't shop there. Talk with your money. But the answer is not to stop shopping at any comic shop. That's crazy. Most of those comic shops, like I said, are happy to take your money, happy to support what they need. And if you're wondering, hey, why don't more local comic shops post up things on Twitter that say, hey, we support Richard Meyer, we support these comics? It's because they don't want to wade into a fight. Or, again, they don't have Twitter in the first place. The smart business doesn't wade into any fight, pro or against Jawbreakers. They just find out what their customers want, they supply it, and they sell it. That's just their pragmatic view. Now, you may disagree with this. You may believe that stores should become activists for one side or another. That's your right, and some stores will do that, but most won't. Most shops, be it comics, sweaters, whatever it happens to be, they're pretty apolitical. They know that taking a side means isolating another side. And if you're trying to stay in business and stay alive, that's not healthy for you. Anyway, that's my perspective on the whole thing. Hope it helps. If you like this video, please like, more importantly, subscribe. I'm not monetizing, but I am looking at who's subscribing and I am taking your feedback into account. So when you send me something at Twitter, at Comic Perch, I listen and I'll often make those topics a video. But more importantly, anything else, I appreciate the people who listen to these very, very much. This is this is a nice hobby of mine, and I really appreciate all the feedback and support that I get. Thanks for listening.